Good evening. I am the mayor, Nicole LaChapelle, of our amazing city, and I look out and see just a group of amazing folks who are giving up a weeknight, a rainy weeknight, to come not only hear about what we've worked on with you over the last several months, but also to get additional feedback of where we're going with the data that we have and what we're going to need to go forward. So thank you for coming out. This is still, we're in the middle of a longer process. Make sure you got your dots, a name tag, and your map. And if you haven't, Johnny, do you have those? Excellent, all right. There's some out in the hallway, and I will now hand the mic over to another amazing member of our City Hall team, Jeff Bagg, who I always appreciate his ideas and his leadership on this project has really been quite innovative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor LaChapelle, and thank you everyone who's here. This is really important, and this is the third session that we've had. I see a lot of people who came to one or both of the other ones, but I also see new faces, which is great, and that's really the type of project that this is. The more people who can understand what we're trying to do, the better this process will go. I am just going to talk for 2 minutes to give a quick review of where this came from. So this is, the process that we're in now is a true opportunity for Easthampton to explore the potential reuses of the 3 elementary schools. And so this is an immediate reaction to the vote last May to fund the construction of a new consolidated K through 8 school. So as soon as that vote was taking shape, the wheels started turning that we would have this and it's an opportunity and it's also a need. We really need to take some time now to get a community vision for these important buildings and what the highest and best use might be. It's a really unique situation where a city has these 3 properties and can have a fair amount of say in what they become in the future. So where we are is the last public meeting. What we're going to get out of this is feedback. Kartik's going to talk about the format, but we're going to recap where we are and some of the key preliminary findings, and then through an exercise we'll go out in the hallway, and what we're hoping that you do is look at the many recommendations, and they're all important, but one thing that you can really do is help us get some priorities of the things that we're seeing now. So we're putting back the recommendations out in front of you all, and then this is your opportunity to kind of just look at them and help give us guidance for the things that are the most important, and then medium importance, and then the third level of importance is still things that we need to do, but we can't tackle them all at once, so we have to have some priorities. I think what I wanted to do was, as part of the grant-funded project, we created a small steering committee. So it's a small group of pretty much all Easthampton residents who have met a couple times with the planning department and the consultant just to give us some bumpers and to just keep us moving forward on some of the ideas and that we don't get off on tangents or off track. So I just wanted to recognize who those people were. Some of them are here tonight and some of them couldn't make it, but we have Omar Gomez, who's a city councilor, Chris Cockshaw, who's a planning board member. I guess if you're here, would you stand up just for a moment, just to be recognized as, so Chris is a planning board member and a resident, Omar is a city councilor and resident, Chris Korchek is a resident, has kids, and is also on the Economic Development Committee. We have Mo Bellevue, who is the executive director of the Easthampton Area Chamber. We have Kylene Cannon, who is a local realtor with Cannon Real Estate, and she can't be here tonight. Dave Delvecchio is a business owner in town and also a board member of the Chamber of Commerce. He also can't be here. We have Naresh Patel, who is a property owner on Cottage Street and Union Street. Rachel Seco, who's a downtown resident and an employee. And John Melanson, who's a downtown resident. Oh, just walked in. So we did try, the other person that we really tried to get involved in this was the owner of Big E's. But when we were approaching them, it was when they were redoing their shelving at the store, and he's like, I'm sorry, I'm too busy, can't do it. So what we have is this group of residents who are involved and aware of the things happening to just help us guide the process forward. And so I just wanted to recognize them, and we really appreciate your help. And sitting through probably multiple hours of meetings. But what I wanted to quick do was offer Chris Korchek and Chris Gottschall just a moment to just tell you what their perspective was on the process so far, just again as residents. So this is a project that we have the help of consultants, but we have a really good, well-rounded base of people looking at all the recommendations and ideas. So I'll hand it over real quick. This will be brief, and then we'll move on to the presentation.
Hey everyone, I'm Chris. I live over by Maple Street School. It's been great to meet so many of you, and I can tell you from behind the scenes, it's not easy putting 200, 300 people's opinions into a distillable form that's usable, but they've done a great job. And there's a reason Easthampton is thriving now. It's because everyone here comes and shows up, and a lot of cities can't boast that. I've spoken with the facilitators, and Boston doesn't even see this many people sometimes. So thank you all for coming, and thanks for participating.
I'm also Chris. I live on Clark Street, the house with the flamingos. So I have been in town for 11 years. I am on the planning board for about 2 years now, and then before that on the Conservation Commission for 6 or 7 years. And I serve because I love this city. And it's clear how much you all love this city too, because these, like I echo what Chris said, was that there were so many people at these 3 sessions to help plan the downtown. So I just want to thank everybody for your passion, for your commitment, and I think you'll see some really great stuff here on what they came up with. I just want to say that, over the 3 sessions, definitely 3 or 4 or 5 things came up that all bubbled up that were common from everybody, so that's kind of what Jeff was getting at about really focusing on the things that are the most important first and then continuing on. So this will be a great plan to allow us to get grants and allow us to move forward in the city. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Great, thanks. So the one thing, I know that Kartik's going to talk about the RFP process, so at the end of this, I just wanted to capture this because we're creating a strategic plan for the downtown, but this is really a project with a lot of meaning. So we have about a 2 or a 2.5 year window until which the schools are empty. And so at the end of this process, what we're trying to do is gather the community input to create a request for proposals. And so I didn't touch on that earlier. That's the document that we're working towards to articulate what we would like to see happen with the 3 properties, and then we put it out and developers come in to bid on it. And so we're starting now. It was one of the best timings I've seen where we have 2.5 years to work through this and come out when the school is vacant with a request for proposal that has had a lot of community input. So I know that you're going to talk about that a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone has a sense of meaning, and this project is one that you will see, I think, hit incremental stages over the next 2 years. And so your involvement is really helpful. If you do the sign-in sheet, either on your way in or on the way out, I would love to be able to email people the version of the plan that we expect to get, like right after Thanksgiving, maybe before the December holidays. So this is we're pretty close to the end, and there'll be a product, and there'll be more calls for participation as we go. So again, thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Jeff. Everybody can hear me clearly, right? I'm not like ringing in your ears or so. Okay. So just with a show of hands, how many of you attended the first meeting? Okay, a lot of you. How many of you attended the second meeting? Okay, a lot of you. That's really great. And I would second Chris's comment. We don't see these kind of crowds anywhere on a lot of our projects. I think 120 people, we had to sort of change our methodologies, to handle such a fantastic participation that we've had in Easthampton. So thank you for, really participating in that process. My name is Kartik Shah. I'm a Director of Urban Design for Harriman, and I'm here with my colleague Jess Wilson. You'll see her speak a little bit later, and also we'll be outside afterwards. So I thought I'll just start with a quick agenda of what we're trying to talk about today. We'll talk about the project overview, how the process has evolved over a period of time. I think we had the sounding board member perspectives already. I'll just briefly touch upon the community engagement feedback, but since a lot of you attended the first and the second meeting, so you probably know what we heard. Then one of the important aspects of this process was how are we developing the criteria for the school reuse. So all the feedback that you gave in the first meeting, we're going to give you an update on how we've developed that criteria and how we've used that feedback. And then we'll get into the downtown strategic plan recommendations. I'm not going to go in depth in each one of them. I think all of you picked up the handout that was kept at the table. Those are the ones where the recommendations are provided in depth. But I'll talk about a little bit about the concept of it, how we arrived at it and what are the larger goals of that. And then a little bit about the next steps, and then towards the end, Jess will come in and just sort of introduce the exercises, what you're supposed to do with the dots and the name tags and so forth. So we have some activities for you out in the corridor. So let's get started. So as Jeff mentioned, we are towards the end of the process over here. We started off, we did the existing condition evaluation. In between, we met with sounding board members. We've shown our analysis to them more in depth than what you see over here. But all those products are available to you on the project website that we have. And based on that, so we're at a draft recommendation stage right now, and then we're going to get a feedback from you. We're going to meet a couple of more times with the sounding board, and then we're going to wrap this process up so that the city can get going on the next steps, and that's actually the implementation part of it. So just sort of to reiterate, what were the goals of this process? We wanted to develop the coordinated vision for this fantastic downtown that you have. Improve Cottage Street and Union Street corridor as the commercial part. Address some of the redevelopment opportunities. Where are the gaps and how we can address them? It's going to be a slow process of looking at, redeveloping, reinvestment in some of these properties, but you do want to have a vision for that. You do want to see, what can happen over here, so when the opportunity comes, it's predictable, and it's not uncertainty that you're sort of facing with. We wanted to examine opportunities for shared parking. That was one of the very specific task items. 40R district zoning and investigating why, how we can tweak it to sort of make it more successful for Easthampton, and then eventually provide sort of a set of steps that the city can take as their next steps as they implement some of the recommendations of this plan. So we had two public meetings. The first public meeting, we asked you about, what the opportunities and the challenges are of this place. I think all of you provided really great feedback. We got to learn a lot. The two exercises were mainly focused on the schools. Tell us, what are the desired uses that you wanted to see in the school buildings? And then, what were your priorities for the school building reuse? And based on that, I'll come to it in briefly, but we've developed the criteria on what we've heard. In the second exercise, we showed you multiple scenarios for each of the sub-areas that we defined. And we had table exercises. You described to us, which scenarios you liked, and there were some really clear winners in some of those scenarios, but in a lot of them, you liked an aspect of this scenario as well as an aspect of the another scenario. So based on all that feedback that we received, we've incorporated that. Another thing that we've did is, we've looked at this at a larger downtown scale. So if we're proposing something near the Main Street area, how does it balance with what happens at the Cottage Street area? So we had to sort of weigh those things as we moved on this. So we had 119 comments that we'd received on what were the desired uses for the schools. And we categorized them into broad themes. You see those themes over here, because they sort of resurfaced many times. Intergenerational use, providing a community space was sort of one of them. Promote arts and culture. So we grouped them so that we would have a 14-point criteria to say that, okay, where do these things fall within all those 119 comments fall within this 14 criteria. And then what we did was, based on those 14 criteria, we established 14 ideas. We established a set of criteria to say that community benefits incorporates 6 or 7 of these ideas. And the goal with this criteria development was, as the request for proposal goes out into the future and you receive proposals back, this criteria acts as a guide for you to evaluate how do those proposals fare against what we had decided during the community process. So you would give, we provided weightage to each of these criteria based on the community feedback that we heard, the number of comments that we received on each one of them. So like community benefits has 5 or 6 different criteria, 5 or 6 different topics inside. So if a proposal comes in and provides for an intergenerational space, a space for our younger generation, sort of space for arts and culture, so they get bonus points in their evaluation, and that's how we've incorporated the desires that you expressed, that we want all these uses as a part of the school buildings. And then that criteria is that weightage is scored and evaluated and tallied to say that, okay, this proposal wins out based on these scores, and we should move ahead with this proposal. I'll talk briefly about this towards the end in terms of, because as Jeff mentioned, it's almost 2.5 years till the RFP would come out. In between, you have a lot of steps to take as you move forward with this. Moving into the key recommendations. We started looking at this at a downtown scale, and one of the things that we realized that you really have some distinct parts in downtown, and how do the uses, the new land uses we proposed, or the reuses or reinvestment that we proposed, sort of strengthen those existing uses. So based on that, we came up with this sort of a land use distribution where near the Main Street you have arts, mixed uses, and housing. Near the Main and Union Street, where the Center School and the Pepin School are, that could be the civic uses and housing, with a lot of commercial that is already existing along the Union Street. The intersection where the Payson Avenue and Union Street meet, where the Hari Scurry is, mainly sort of a mixed use and housing uses. And then towards the Cottage Street area, the goal was to sort of build up on the existing synergies that are already there with the businesses, the narrowness of the Cottage Street that sort of promotes a very pedestrian-friendly environment. You feel that this is sort of a very unique place, and we felt that that was because the street was narrow. You could see the users on the other side. You could walk across very easily. The parking was very much close by. And we wanted to build up on those things and say that we would have mixed-use housing, artist housing, studios, those kind of uses could be incorporated in that area. We also looked at, we have the Manhattan Trail, and as a part of the Union Street Transportation Improvement Project, there's going to be a bike lane that's going to be introduced over there. During the community process, we did hear the concerns that, because the Union Street is very narrow, not many people actually ride along the Union Street, or for that matter, along Cottage Street. So one of the larger strategy for the bike connectivity was to sort of provide additional alternate bike paths that could be identified, that people could use, that could be marked on the streets to say that, if you're coming from here, from the mill side, and you want to go to the Cottage Street, this is sort of the designated path that you could take. And it's designated, everybody knows about it, everybody expects it as they drive from that area. I think there's also a series of open spaces that you will see have been introduced over here. We feel that there's a very strong opportunity with what you call a Rotary today, a new open space over here next to the center school, and an open space near the Maple Street Elementary, but facing the Maple Street. And we'll talk a little bit in detail, as we look at each of the sub-areas. I know that parking was, it's one of the hot topics in all the projects that we work in. It's sort of, that's the first thing sort of everybody experiences as they use the space, as they use the downtown or so. And that's always on your mind first. One of the things that we saw is you have a lot of parking spaces in the downtown, almost 2,000 spaces. It's just that they're sort of distributed among each of the different businesses as well. And the goal is to sort of not build more parking or not provide, for each of those users, parking that sort of eats away from, walkability in downtown, promotes sort of more asphalt and more cars over here, but sort of optimize the number of spaces that you have. And then based on that, just provide enough so that it satisfies the needs of the downtown, and the rest could be utilized for adding a little bit more future development, more open spaces, more walkability in downtown. So based on that sort of a larger goal, we suggested that, okay, there are 4 places that you could have shared parking. Shared parking arrangement with Easthampton Savings Bank. I think that's going to be a really critical one for the success of the old town hall project, where where the new performing arts space and as well as community space is being proposed. I think that's going to be critical. The other one is near Union and Main Street, where the city can actually contribute to the parking that is already available. And also with the uses that get proposed over there with the center school and the Pepin School, I think that could be a really lively area in the future. But one of the critical part of it would be developing a shared parking strategy for that area, working with the 2 churches too. The other, one of the near-term actions, we thought that, before we build any kind of a capital project where you're sort of improving the parking lot or so, how about identifying, what are the existing opportunities that already exist? So in short term, you already have parking in the Maple Street area, behind the Maple Street Elementary School, that remains empty in the evening, and the restaurants and the businesses in the Cottage Street area do have a requirement for parking. So maybe on a short-term basis, we could work out an arrangement where in the evening those spaces could be utilized by the businesses as you develop a long-term public parking over there, based on whatever the uses that get developed in the Maple Street Elementary School. The other was, there's a City Hall parking lot. There are other parking lots where we need to just do wayfinding and signage. Let people know that there is parking over here, so that it's easily identifiable, because all these parking spaces are within the walking distance of downtown, within the walking distance of all the businesses you have. So these were just sort of, the identified shared parking places, but some of the other ones where you could have some more additional shared parking between different businesses that, adds to the parking inventory that you already have, so that you're not building more parking spaces. Those could be utilized more efficiently. The ones that you have could be utilized more efficiently. So we heard about, how this plan works at a larger scale, at the whole downtown scale. What are the strategies at that scale? As we moved in this planning process, we also zoomed in on 4 different sub-areas where the sounding board members, the city sort of said that these are some of the critical items that we need to discuss, or we need to have some sort of a strategies for. So we looked at 4 different sub-areas. One was the Main Street area, and here our goal, based on the feedback that we received in the last one, if you remember, we shown you 3 different scenarios and I asked for your preference. What would you prefer over here? And overwhelmingly, what we saw was mixed use and housing was the 2. I think one of them sort of was the top priority, but those were the top 2 that sort of came up. We felt that as this area is sort of an anchor for the downtown, and as its transition, this is also where the residential area sort of, the downtown sort of transitions to residential areas. So we felt that you have more of the residential uses towards the northern side, while mixed uses were proposed towards more near the downtown, so that those users could add to the vibrancy that's already there. The other important aspect that we saw in many of the places, in many cities, these kind of configurations exist, where you have a sort of an open space or and streets on 3 sides or so. And many of the cities, Newburyport comes as an example, have reclaimed some of these spaces for open spaces. If you think of the Market Square, that used to be streets on 3 sides. But the street from the one side was eliminated to sort of extend that Market Street Plaza. And I feel that, yes, there is a sort of a long-term opportunity over here. Right now, Rotary does not get utilized as an open space. You do have arts and future performing arts related uses over here that are going to enliven the area. And I think this is an opportunity for you to look at how we can revitalize Rotary as an open space for arts exhibition, outdoor events, and so forth, and how we can improve pedestrian connectivity to it. In terms of transportation access and parking, I think one of the important one in this area was definitely working out the shared parking strategy to activate the old town hall, as well as examining the long-term improvements for the Main Street and Route 10, which is, if this Route Northampton Street or Route 10 and Main Street could be worked out as a T intersection, you have this the street, existing street available to you as a local street that could be utilized for many other purposes. The other thing that we saw was Main Street, is very wide. You have a lot of asphalt in between on one end to the other end. So, and that's why I think people feel that this is where sort of the downtown ends, and there's some businesses over there, and they're thriving, but they're not doing really great. I think one of the things that we felt that along the main street over here, if some of that asphalt space could be reclaimed for pedestrians, and doing a road diet to sort of to make sure that you're just giving enough space for the vehicles, and that could really help bring this northern part of the main street sort of closer to the rest of the downtown, and could really help enliven both the sides of it. And many of the downtowns, I think the other that comes to my mind is Concord, went through the same exercise where you have a sort of an angle, Concord, New Hampshire, angled parking next to the businesses. But a lot of the space was reclaimed for pedestrians, and the businesses are doing well. It's a very lively environment for pedestrians to walk in. I keep talking about pedestrian improvements, and in planning, it's one of the most important aspects, as we do planning, because if you think about it, almost 50% of any of the area is occupied by streets. You can propose parks, you can propose open spaces, but your best open spaces are actually the streets. So the more you make your streets better, the more you make your streets walkable, you're just adding to the vibrancy of your downtown. And that's why the pedestrian improvements get so much importance in all of our planning work. In Main and Union Street area, we really felt this is one of the most unique part of the Union Street. I think you have a lot of the businesses in close proximity. You have good sort of walkability on both the sides. There's businesses that front the streets. It's very lively to walk over here. And within that, close to that area, what if we added a little bit more activity in the form of future civic use, an intergenerational center that everybody desired as a part of the first workshop. I think what if that got introduced as a part of the Cottage Street, Center School building, and then as a part of the Pepin School building can be a future housing, could be a senior housing, would definitely, all your housing, whatever we show over here, we are assuming that it will have an affordable housing component as a part of it. One of the things that we did was we didn't sort of went ahead and propose a direct affordable housing project in any one of these. I think as you go through the disposition process, allow the market to play out. In Boston, where we're seeing is, the community development corporations, including, I forget the name, community development corporations, which are looking after, the civic uses that should be part of all these spaces. They are acting as developers. They are collaborating with affordable housing developers. They are collaborating with for-profit developers and are inserting themselves into projects like this to get the benefits that the community want. And we felt that, for Easthampton to get the best responses for the building school reuse, we should keep those options open and not sort of narrow it down to say that this building has to be this use itself. And as we talked about the criteria before, you do have an opportunity, to get all the uses that you desire, intergenerational space, community space, or so. As a part of that criteria, if any developer who comes in and proposes a housing, senior housing over here, and provides any kind of an amenity for the town, his proposal gets some bonus points. So So there are opportunities over here where in a lot of these uses, those kind of uses that you'd ask for could be incorporated. Additionally, an open space at the intersection of School Street and Clark Avenue. We also looked at an option where, what if the Pepin School building could be developed as a future library? It's quite possible. We don't know, what the library plans are, but this could be one of the sites over here, and we wanted to test it out. There is a parking available for them. This would be able to accommodate, it's almost 15 to 16,000 square feet, so at 2 stories, it will be able to accommodate the uses that they have or the space requirement that they have. If this became a future library, there are a lot of these community spaces, libraries, the way they're being planned right now and the way they're being built right now, with a lot of flexible spaces, flexible uses in them. So you can't just think of them as, one use. Libraries have community space in them. There's just a library that got built in front of my house, which is a library, a community center with a swimming pool on the back and middle school attached to it. And just, the proximity of all these uses makes sure that all these spaces are utilized all throughout the day, and none of the space that sort of gets wasted, during any part of the day. So as you think of these future libraries or future civic uses, think of that a lot of uses could be packed into this for the city's benefit. Other idea over here was, a shared parking lot with city contributing to the parking, I think would really enliven the area. As sort of, because now you have all this parking available over here, it may also free up some land for adding a little bit more activity along Union Street. You have, we talked about, Union Street with sort of continuous set of uses, but there are these kind of gaps where you have parking lots show up. And if you see any of the places that are vibrant and they're successful, continuous street wall is one of the qualities that they have. And this is what we're trying to build over here so that Union Street could be successful in the future. It's already successful, by the way. The lower Union Street, as a part of the second workshop, everybody strongly expressed their opinion that redevelopment should be one of the options that should be pursued over here. One of the other comments that came up is whatever we propose over here, make sure that the parking requirements for those users are sort of balanced so that you're not overburdening the already you're not sort of spilling over the parking onto the streets or onto the neighborhood streets or so. So we felt, keeping with the character of this place, Union Street could have a retail or a mixed-use uses facing the street, while the residential uses are sort of mainly concentrated towards the back, facing the Payson Avenue, with a parking lot in the center. During the day, that could be the parking lot for shoppers, and if there are any restaurants over here, for them, for those users to park over here. While in the evening, those parking lot could have some of the additional parking that might be required for some of the residential uses that get proposed over here. But the larger goal in this sub-area was to rebuild, re-strengthen the Union Street with more mixed-use activity and keep filling those gaps. As a part of whatever that comes up in the future, we want to find opportunities where you add a little bit more open spaces as a part of smaller plazas, wider sidewalks, to keep building on that. We know that there are some parking spaces that are being eliminated as a part of the Union Street project right now, transportation improvement. We thought that, as and when whatever the form of development that happens over here, you want to make sure that you incorporate some setback over here so that the bike lane requirements, the on-street parking could be reincorporated back as a part of that project. This is Cottage Street. It was what I called it sort of I think as a part of our recommendation, as a sort of a very creative and strategic infill. And you have this fantastic scale of buildings over here up to 2 stories height. The nature of the Cottage Street is such that the street is narrow, it slows down the traffic. The traffic or the people who are in the car have an opportunity to see outside and look at the businesses, attractive businesses, and they want to sort of come back to this area, park somewhere and come back to this area. I think that's one of the qualities of Cottage Street that makes it a very endearing place for you to visit. We wanted to build up on that. We wanted to make sure that the scale of anything that we proposed was in keeping with already existing character of 2 to 3 story building. What this shows right now is sort of a mixed use development, setback from the building, a lot of outdoor spaces, restaurants could sort of spill out, a pedestrian connection to the whatever the uses that get developed in the Maple Street school. Reconnecting all this back to the Cottage Street environment. But if you think about it, whatever the existing uses are, a creative entrepreneur could come in, can take existing buildings along the Cottage Street and reuse the same buildings to promote something very creative. It sort of opens up towards the back with patios and a very lively environment. And it could be restaurants, could be art galleries. It's just building up on already existing character of the Cottage Street. So yes, this all looks new, but all these uses can also be incorporated within the existing building framework that you already have. What we're trying to propose is, how do we connect the school with the Cottage Street? How do we sort of optimize the parking over here? How do we create a much more livelier environment on the other side too for you to use? The Maple Street Elementary School building. Architecturally, it is possible to incorporate any of the uses that are suggested over there, artist housing, studios, or senior housing, or so forth. The building widths are such that all of these uses can be suggested over there. And as I mentioned before, we wanted to keep it open for that creative partnerships could be formed. You get creative proposals to look at, which suggest different uses for this building, and based on the criteria, the best proposal can win out and develop this. So as a part of, so what happens after the study is done? This study, the way it was established, it sort of becomes, it's done all the legwork for you, getting the community feedback for what should happen in the schools, establishing the criteria. So it's done a whole lot of the legwork for the city. So based on this study and the feedback that we received, you're going to have a sort of a downtown Easthampton investment that will sort of go on, and it's a long process as you take each of these recommendations and strategies and start implementing them. The very first one, the Union Street Transportation Improvement Project, there are some zoning updates that will be required to allow the uses that were desired by you in the schools. Short-term and long-term parking improvements. We identified some additional transportation-related studies. Near the main street, we talked about pedestrian improvements over there, reclaiming some of the the asphalt that sort of widens Main Street. I think how do we reclaim that? And then the redevelopment and reinvestment on each of those parcels, I think that's going to be an ongoing process as you move forward. Simultaneously, next 2 years or so, the school building reuse and redevelopment, it's going to use this study as a foundation. The process will involve, formation of a school building reuse committee. There's sort of time required for development of an RFP, incorporating all the feedback that we've talked during this process as a part of the RFP. So whoever submits responses to the RFP knows that, okay, what is desired over here. And then the actual disposition process, and then once the school buildings are sold, the actual redevelopment, reuse of those. So one of the things that we were discussing, that this just from here to formation of the school building committee, reuse committee would be 1 to 2 year process, and getting all the ducks in the row or so forth. And it's good enough time to allow for some capacity building over here. I know that there was strong desire for artist users and artist-related users, or a lot of those community-focused users that wanted to be in those buildings. And this is 2 years is a really good opportunity to look at some examples from the other cities, see how you can form community land trust or some of the other non-profit organization, and how they can participate in this process. And I think that'll be really important for you to consider as you think of those civic users. So I'll invite Jess over here.
So we have a couple exercises we're going to do out in the hall now. If you didn't pick up dots on your way in, they are at the sign-in table. And also, if you haven't signed in yet, please do so. So you can take one set of dots, so each person gets 10 green dots. And there's, I think, 40-something recommendations divided among the 4 sub-areas that Kartik just presented. So you're going to take your 10 dots and vote on what you think should be the highest priorities out of all those recommendations. So there's boards set up in the hallway that display the maps alongside the recommendations, and you can just place your dots right next to those recommendations that you want to vote for. The second thing is looking sort of at the big picture, the overall plan that we've presented, leaving more general comments and feedback. If there are anything you think should be a recommendation that hasn't been addressed yet, please leave a comment, and there's boards with orange text set up for that, and name tags like what you have on your shirts that were also at the sign-in table. Those are on the table with the map. So you can just write your comments right on those name tags and adhere it to the board.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
We have a project website, and
Plan downtown dash Easthampton.
If you Google it.
Yeah,
it's Plan Downtown Easthampton. And so we'll put up the presentation there. And I know that not everyone uses Facebook, so that's fine. But the planning department has a good Facebook page that we try to keep very active. And so if you are inclined, if you haven't liked the page, it's a good way to follow some of this stuff. But what I was trying to get at is, by mid-December, we should have a final report. And so if you sign up as you leave and put your name and an email address that we can read, I'm happy to email people directly when that's available, and I'll put it at the library, I'll put one in town hall, I can put one in the town clerk's office. I want people to see that there is a lot more depth to this. This is the overview, but we will have a strategic plan that I want to make sure that people can figure out how to get it if you're so inclined. So I want to work on that messaging as we go, but there will be a report that I want to make as available as possible.